Session 2, ethics, artificial intelligence. Bear with me, this is my 6th AI talk of the week, 2nd of the day. I'm your host, Freddie Stevens, and we will have a discussion about AI. Some USD kid loved it here, so I'm Freddie Stevens. It is pretty fun because I did take them through some prompt exercises to try and recreate the University of South Dakota logo. On the right is as close as we could get. That's my work. Their work was not so great, but that's as close as we could get playing around with a little bit of Dolly this morning. So fun little thing there. We'll talk about some actual use here in a minute. So same kind of rules as last time of I would really just appreciate some dedicated time with you all today. I know you guys got client emails coming in. It's no longer the noon hour, so we got people that stuff over email and text message. Try to have this conversation with me. It takes quite a bit of time to kind of deduce all this information from a lot of different sources, and I do feel like it can really help us be better at our jobs. And so I do feel like there's some importance here, and I would love if we were connected on that front. So agency ethics today, obviously talked about philosophy last time, and I do like to start with some quick stories. So I was scrolling on Instagram last night, and I've been following OpenAI. Sora is a product that they're releasing. It's not currently out yet. Sora is a video generation model. It's actually something that Brent is keeping a really close eye on. He just sent me a couple of really cool short films, short skits about it. But I was really impressed by what I saw last night. This is going to be a little bit small, but top video being the input video car in what looks like western South Dakota. But notice how they are using a little bit of prompting in order to change the scenery. Really, really cool, right? Go all the way underwater, go to different vacation destinations, go to Duluth, go to Joshua Tree. This is really impressive. This is gonna change kind of how we do some of the work. But I spent some time in the comments and try and keep up with the scroll, but my heart is heavy for my brothers and sisters who work in visual effects. Don't pretend like you don't know what you're doing with this technology. And just like that, so many corporations started planning their layoffs. You should maybe stop. We don't need this. Can you imagine the lies that the media is going to tell us? Well, pack it up, boys. Art is over. Right? I was really inspired when I first saw the video, and then I quickly became really sad when I ended up in this section of it. And I think that it kind of shows the polarity of this all, is that you can have both of those exist and it still happens. And really what's at play here is ethics, right? Well, that's why before we start getting into how to use these tools, which we will, we'll get into some hands-on learning. We still need to understand what can be the impact of what we are producing. Under Armour did not know the impact that they were having when they were doing a fight promo leading up to this specific bout. I don't know if anyone is boxing. Maybe Josh, you already know who these guys are. Cool. AJ, Anthony Joshua, is in contract with Under Armour. He's an athlete that they sponsor. They've shot a lot of live set stuff with him. They've done spots. They've done audio. They've done a lot of different things. They want to have video leading up to this fight. In his training, Anthony Joshua could not commit the time to actually be the on-screen talent. He was training hardcore. He had no time to do any voiceover work. He had no time to do any live filming. So Under Armour still really wanted to push a spot out. They had some of those assets. They ended up here.
It's an easy choice. Made the hard way. You can fight, or you can fade. Because time doesn't care. It's happy to forget you. yesterday. And the future is made when you fight, like there's no tomorrow.
No actual shooting when I do that. 30 seconds spot, right? Pretty impressive, pretty inspiring, probably hit all of the goals that Under Armour was looking to achieve. They had a shitstorm on their hands. The entire public at large want to talk about the community and the careers of the people that help make something like this happen in the world that we live in right now, right? All the way down to the grips and the set people and the people who help make this stuff happen, and they were able to not even have their on-screen talent and do this. Now, they found a way to help explain the change that's happening and how there was still a lot of talent and creativity and people involved in this process. But again, this is the ethics thing, a lot like that Sora video I showed you of this is kind of what we're dealing with in present day. So I was trying to figure out how do we like equip the agency with kind of some, I don't know, useful tools that say, this is how we approach it. Here's how we control or hedge the risk that we have. Because pretty soon I'm going to show you a lot of news segments, and I really don't want LMS to end up in the news for something like this. And again, these people are doing incredible work, but there's this whole dark side to it that people aren't really considering. And so what I've developed for the presentation today is some actual things that we can reference after today. We're going to approach ethics, one, by agreeing on terminology. There's a lot of terminology when it comes to this AI stuff, and it can get really confusing. And half the time I'm reading and rereading and rereading. Every time I'm on a flight, I'm learning about quantum computing and I'm learning about statistics. It gets pretty in the weeds of how this stuff works. So we have some resources for that. Clear guidelines. What's the game plan for how we are going to use AI in the building and talk about it to our clients? How are we going to do approvals? We're going to reference something called the AI green list that I'll show you, here in a little bit. And lastly, who's overseeing all this? Who's involved when somebody wants to use it or wants to involve it in a campaign? How do they go about doing that? We have clear governance and oversight. It's really hard in such a nebulous field of study to have something that's like fairly cut and dry. And what I'm attempting to do is give us 4 main tools, methods, mediums, whatever, to help take something like ethics, which is like intangible, and make it something that's a little bit more reasonable to work with. So the first is clear terms. When we can agree on language, then we know that we're on the same page, because oftentimes I was having Q&A sessions with the USD students, and they would ask a question, I was answering a question, I could tell what they're asking, I wasn't answering really in their way. Even though we're talking about AI, we're on different ends of the spectrum. Clear terminology helps fix that. And so I do have to briefly get into what we're talking about today. A future session is actually going to be understanding how this works. But what I need you guys to start understanding is, much like when I use the analogy of AI is the same term as like technology and how technology can be here, there, and everywhere. Now we're going to start getting down into the tree or the hierarchy of terms. And it seems like this is all computer science stuff, but I'll tell you, when client asks what type of AI technology are we using for this campaign on the media side, on the creative side, what have you, you need to be able to say, we are using this, right? So I'm not going to go into all of these, but what today's takeaway is, essentially in present day, we are in the era of narrow AI. Okay, narrow AI doesn't take rocket science to figure this out. Narrow AI is designed and developed to perform single tasks. ChatGPT is to try and replicate human language. DALL-E, Midjourney, any of these image generators, their goal is to help develop imagery based on pattern, right? The folks that talk about the Terminator self-actualization, like it's gonna take over the world, we are not there yet. You may have heard Dr. Griffiths talk about other types of AI. That gets into general AI. That's saying, I go to ChatGPT to talk about sentences, but then also I want it to help provide Netflix recommendations over here and do different things. It's not designed to do that. It's not going to perform well. We aren't there yet. That's 2020, 30 and on. Super AI is when it's effectively surpassed what we can do as humans. So general AI would be the AI is to the level of what Travis can do. He can work on notes over here, and then he can work on a website over here, and then he can build a PowerPoint presentation over here. That's general. Super would be that the AI can do that, but at a way better rate than me. So that's kind of your three here. We'll eventually get into based on functionalities where 4 through 7 come in. But again, for today, let's not be confused. Let's stick with narrow AI. Buckle up though. We're talking about generative AI, which is underneath narrow AI. So imagine the whole chart was on that previous slide, right? We zoom in to number 1. Now we're going to go deeper in narrow AI. Generative AI, one of many. Generative AI is essentially you have knowledge-based information, you have your data, hopefully it's good data. It can be web scrape data, so it can be what Google can find. It can be law cases, if it's going to be some type of encyclopedia of previous laws. It can be whatever your data is. It can be our media performance, whatever. It takes that information. It tries to find the most statistically probable next piece in the line. So let me give this, let's think about ChatGPT. As I'm typing a sentence, the quick brown fox, right? It understands based on language models, LLM, that the can be followed by quick, which can be followed by fox. It understands nouns, verbs, adjectives, that type of thing. That's generative AI. It's building it all together based on knowledge, right? Based on your data set. Now, that's just language part of it. Generative AI has uses in visuals, creative, we saw that, right? I can make imagery, you can make video, it can create code, it can write code for us. It can do things with climate and chemistry and visual representations as well. So we're kind of in the era of generative AI. When people say we're using AI, more likely than not, they're using generative AI. And I feel, my opinion is that where we're going to incorporate AI into the work that we do is going to be through generative AI. So under that premise, that's what Under Armour used, but they wanted to caution the public that it still took a lot of talent and human intervention to make this spot. If they just used a different set of tools, which they should have been a little bit more forthright with it, but it's a little bit easier to understand now that you see the behind the scenes.
More solid in who I am and what I am, what I stand for in this game. Because time doesn't care. It's happy to forget you.
That ending slide could have said it better, and it just hopped off, but it's still required, right? We're using a different set of tools, yes. But you can see the concern and the anxiety around AI in present day. So the reason that is because AI isn't meant to be ethical. It does not need to use discernment. It does not need to use judgment. I like analogies a lot. I use analogies a lot. I also quote other people a lot. So generative AI is a tool. We are responsible for the outcomes, but for example, if we use autocorrect and it unintentionally changes a word, changing the entire meaning of the sentence, we are still responsible for the text, right? That's on us. Technology enables us, but does not excuse our judgment nor our empathy. If Joey mistypes and put something into a lottery app. That gets proofed and sent out, and that causes a lot of issues for us. It's on us, right? Doesn't matter that his keyboard was a stroke or his computer was the machine. It's still on him. It's still on us as a team proofing. It's still on a creative director. It's still on the team that it routed with. It's just technology. To help understand how some of these things work, you need to understand how generative AI works. So back to my friends at IBM, I think they do a really good job of this. Bear with me, it's a little bit of a longer video, but it'll help give you some foundational knowledge so we can continue working through narrow AI, generative AI, and how it works.
With all the excitement around ChatGPT, it's easy to lose sight of the unique risks of generative AI. Large language models, a form of generative AI, are really good at helping people who struggle with writing English prose. It can help them unlock the written word at low cost and sound like a native speaker. But because they're so good at generating the next syntactically correct word, large language models may give a false impression that they possess actual understanding or meaning. The results can include a flagrantly false narrative directly as a result of its calculated predictions versus a true understanding. So ask yourself, what is the cost of using an AI that could spread misinformation? What is the cost to your brand, your business, individuals, or society? Could your large language model be hijacked by a bad actor? Let me explain how you can reduce your risk. It falls into 4 areas: hallucinations, bias, consent, and security. As I present each risk, I'll also call out the strategies you can use to mitigate these risks. You ready? Let's start with the falsehoods, often referred to as AI hallucinations. Quick sidebar, I really don't like the word hallucinations because I fear it anthropomorphizes AI. I'll explain in a bit. Okay, you've probably heard the news reports of large language models claiming they're human, or claiming they have emotions, or just stating things that are factually wrong. What's actually going on here? Well, large language models predict the next best syntactically correct word, not accurate answers based on understanding of what the human is actually asking for, which means it's gonna sound great, but might be 100% wrong in its answer. This wrong answer is a statistical error. Let's take a simple example. Who authored the poems A, B, C? Let's say they were all authored by the poet X, but there's one source claiming it was the author Z. We have conflicting sources in the training data. Which one actually wins the argument? Even worse, the error may not be a disagreement at all, but again, a statistical error. The response could very well be incorrect because, again, the large language models do not understand meaning. These inaccuracies can be exceptionally dangerous. It's even more dangerous when you have large language models annotate its sources for totally bogus answers. Why? Because it gives the perception it has proof when it just doesn't have any. Imagine a call center that has replaced its personnel with a large language model and it offers a factually wrong answer to a customer. Right? Here's your factually wrong answer. Now, imagine how much angrier this customer will be when they can't actually offer a correction via feedback loop. This brings us to our first mitigation strategy, explainability. Now, you could offer inline explainability and pair a large language model with a system that offered real data and data lineage and provenance via knowledge graph. Why did the model say what it just said? Where did it pull its data from? Which sources? The large language model could provide variations on the answer that was offered by the knowledge graph. Next risk, bias. Do not be surprised if the output for your original query only lists white, male, Western European poets. Want a more representative answer? Your prompt would have to say something like, can you please give me a list of poets that include women and non-Western Europeans? Don't expect the large language model to learn from your prompt. This brings us to the second mitigation strategy, culture and audits. Okay, culture is what people do when no one is looking. It starts with approaching this entire subject with humility, as there is so much that has to be learned, and even, I would say, unlearned. You need teams that are truly diverse and multidisciplinary in nature working on AI, because AI is a great mirror into our own biases. Let's take the results of our audits of AI models and make corrections to our own organizational culture when there are disparate outcomes. Audit pre-model deployment as well as post-model deployment. Okay, next risk, consent. Is the data that you're curating representative? Was it gathered with consent? Are there copyright issues? All right, here's a little copyright symbol. These are things we can and should ask for. This should be included in an easy to find, understandable fact sheet. Oftentimes, we subjects, we have no idea where the heck the training data came from these large language models. Where is it gathered from? Did the developers hoover the dark recesses of the internet? To mitigate consent-related risk, we need combined efforts of auditing and accountability. All right? Accountability includes establishing AI governance processes, making sure you are compliant to existing laws and regulations, and you're offering ways for people to have their feedback incorporated. Now onto the final risk, security. Large language models could be used for all sorts of malicious tasks, including leaking people's private information, helping criminals phish, spam, scam. Hackers have gotten AI models to change their original programming, endorsing things like racism, suggesting people do illegal things. It's called jailbreaking. Another attack is an indirect prompt injection. That's when a third party alters a website, adding hidden data to change the AI's behavior. The result? Automation relying on AI, potentially sending out malicious instructions without you even being aware. This brings us to our final mitigation strategy, and the one that actually pulls all of this together, and that is education. All right, let me give you an example. Training a brand new large language model produces as much carbon as over 100 round-trip flights between New York and Beijing. I know, crazy, right? This means it's important that we know the strengths and weaknesses of this technology. It means educating our own people on principles for the responsible curation of AI, the risks, the environmental costs, the safeguard rails, as well as what the opportunities are. Let me give you another example of where education matters. Today, some tech companies are just trusting that large language models' training data has not been maliciously tampered with. I can buy a domain myself now and fill it with bogus data. By poisoning the data set with enough examples, you could influence a large language model's behavior and outputs forever. This tech isn't going anywhere. We need to think about the relationship that we ultimately want to have with AI. If we're going to use it to augment human intelligence, we have to ask ourselves the question, what is the experience like of a person who has been augmented? Are they indeed empowered? Help us make education about the subject of data and AI far more accessible and inclusive than it is today.
We're in this education phase, right? And I want to figure out how we were going to essentially say where AI fits in at LMS. So I tried to figure out what other companies do in terms of their AI approach and how they're going to fit into their work. And I realized there's just a lot of bogus shit out there on the internet. Check this out. So we have this really complicated graph. How about this one? Different knowledge expert. How about that one? All this stuff is floating out there saying this is how generative AI and the future of work will live. You're gonna do this, this, and this. I thought that was complicated. So this is what I've essentially been able to boil it down to. We're going to go through essentially this boot camp, right? And eventually we're going to get into the dirty, dark corners of really how AI works. Hopefully you will leave these sessions feeling enabled in a way, right? Feeling like you've been armed with a little bit of knowledge, you have some you have some resources at your fingertips that we'll get into as well. That's when you will work with your discipline, your coach, your department, across agencies, cross discipline, cross team, and we're going to figure out which applications you use. You can't pick an application if you don't understand how those applications work, and if you don't feel good about them. So once we do that, then we use those tools with how we approach our work, right? And we talked about the evolved work approach, how it's not going to replace, it's not going to do this, it's not going to do that. This is how I see this kind of being a red thread and all coming together. This is our version of everyone trying to rip off how generative AI in the future of work happens. But the most interesting piece that we haven't talked about yet was that cluster of people, right? The 4 best looking people at LMS right here on the screen. That's why we're using them. But we have everyone in this room because you're talented, you're creative, you're smart, you're quick, you're all these things, but also you have a brain, you have a heart, and you have EQ, and hopefully you have IQ, and you can use discretion. You guys are the important part that makes this work. I think you might have heard Dr. Griffiths talk about this at the event as well, that people don't have human loop models. Now, we can't stand by what ChatGPT or what Sora or Midjourney or any of these other tools that can go down, Copilot, whatever. We can't stand by the quality of their applications, which is really hard for us. Puts us in a very compromising position. But in our own model, we can have human in the loop, right? Which allows us to do a lot of different things. The reason why human in the loop is kind of an industry-wide term is because everybody kind of agrees that it generally refers to the need for the interaction, intervention, and the judgment to control or change what eventually comes out of this door, outside of this agency. It's increasingly being emphasized because of where we're at with machine learning, with ML, and with generative AI. That's Harvard data science. So what that model is going to help us do is avoid being in the news for any one of these things. And this seems very straightforward, guys, but it is such a muddy, murky place when you are trying to achieve a goal and it's exciting. It's a lot like that Instagram example of, I thought it was great at face value, but then you realize really what you've missed throughout the process. That's why we need clear guidelines. So in the following slides, we're going to talk about how we can have a formal stance against certain things, starting with toxicity and what Microsoft.
Now, the company created an artificial intelligence chat bot. It was a computer that they named Tay, who was designed to respond to questions and conversations on Twitter with the personality of a teenage girl. So you can see there she started
That's
out by
a bad idea right there.
It doesn't sound great, does it? Now, she started out tweeting about how humans are super, and she's really into the idea of National Puppy Day. Now, the idea behind Tay was that her output was modeled on what was happening on Twitter, the responses that she gets from humans. And within a few hours, you can see she took on a rather offensive, racist tone, a lot of messages about genocide and the Holocaust. Now, other users on Twitter do appear to have been baiting her a little bit with provocative questions that was designed to make this robot react in a sort of
garbage in, garbage out. You'll see that in one of the resources that I've developed, but essentially the data that's being fed, the training data, which the model that Microsoft took there was it's going to learn off of reply interactions, right? It's getting garbage in. What does it spew? Hate and garbage out. That could have been, that seems like, oh, that's very straightforward. We could have thought that easy. Back in the day, we might have tried to do a fun summer of Taco with Taco John example, right? Talk with Taco John and see, have a fun conversation with him. That could have went south, sideways, real quick, right? So our official stance on it is going to be, we're going to use extreme caution when leveraging AI that directly connects with consumers or whatever our end audience is. Anytime that they can kind of bypass any of our controls and immediately interact, we're going to use extreme caution in those instances. Toxicity. This is probably the most concerning for me.
The Republican National Committee this week using computer-generated video to show apocalyptic what-if scenarios for President Biden to be reelected.
It feels like the train is coming off the tracks.
But AI in politics is hardly hypothetical. It's here. From fake pictures of Donald Trump getting arrested to a fake video of President Biden instituting a military draft.
The recommended way forward will be to invoke the Selective Service Act.
Artificial intelligence, with its easily accessed voice cloning and face swapping tools, adding a new dimension to the political universe.
What I worry about in particular is that 2024 will be a GPT election. It will be the first time that these technologies are available in the context of an election, in the context of hundreds of millions of dollars, trying to push into the persuasion space.
In some ways, AI helps political operatives, making it easier to fundraise or communicate with voters. NBC News has learned the Democratic National Committee, for example, has experimented with drafting campaign emails using AI, according to a source familiar, who says a staffer still edits before anything's sent widely. Eric Wilson's a Republican digital strategist.
We're really excited about the potential for artificial intelligence to help make campaigns more interactive and to really free up campaign staff to hire better uses of their time, just like any other tool would.
Still, there's a dangerous downside to AI, the risk of disinformation.
And allowing Republicans to vote.
Take this computer-generated Elizabeth Warren, suggesting Republicans shouldn't be allowed to cast ballots.
It is necessary to restrict Republican voting in the 2024 election.
The senator never said that, but AI can make it easier for anyone, not just experts, to create fake content. To show you how simple it can be, we tried prompting one AI site with something ludicrous.
Politician kicking puppies.
But some strategists worry about what could happen when the lines blur around what's real and what's not.
2024 is going to be a tough year for social media and the content that we're seeing. It's already a place of a lot of toxicity, and Brent and I were having a discussion before this session. It's getting harder to discern what's this and what's that. And so it should seem very obvious that we're not going to create deepfake videos at the agency, sure. But we need to remember why we're doing the things that we're doing. We will always seek to stir curiosity and interest in our advertising to help appeal to our goals. But we can't do it in a way that's purposely misleading, unless that we're trying to create something very far-fetched that's supposed to really, like, you know what, buffaloes flying in the air, that type of thing. But there's a fine line, right, of people. Of us eventually ending up in the news, right? Disinformation. This one's tough because while we're not going to probably likely create our own models, you can see how all the platforms that we use, the big tech platforms, the big data platforms, it's this easy for these tried and trusted software engineers to not be able to control some of the data that's being aggregated.
Amazon software engineers recently uncovered a big problem. Their new online recruiting tool did not like women. The glitch, sources told Reuters, stemmed from the fact that Amazon's computer models were trained by observing patterns in resumes of job candidates over a 10-year period, largely from men, in effect teaching themselves that male candidates were preferable. Reuters correspondent Jeffrey Daston.
The technology thought, oh, Amazon doesn't like any resume that has the word women's in it. Women's, captain of a women's chess club, captain of a women's soccer team, and all women's university, because the company has hired so many male engineers or software developers, data scientists, so forth, that clearly the unsuccessful candidates are the ones who also would have this word women's in it.
Amazon never solely relied on these online recruiting tools and disbanded the unit that created it by the start of last year, sources said.
So you have to remember that underneath AI, you have machine learning, right? What is machine learning? It's less explicit code. It doesn't say that headline should be this, body copy should be this. That's what the way code is today. What machine learning is the one piece of code says, look for pattern, right? Now, that resume example is a good example, but the same could be said if we're using any type of AI to figure out media optimization, media performance. Find commonalities when we had a better conversion rate during this time period than this. What's going to be difficult for us is to figure out is there another side to this that we can see, right? So that's where we may not be using it to vet what makes a good LMSer, which we talk about a lot in different meetings, but you can see how this could trickle down based on all it's looking for is patterns, right? And that's on the machine learning side of generative AI. So our official stance on this, we need external validation reviews. We need to audit ourselves much, much harder because seeing our own biases is not easy. I think a lot of you have been through a couple of different leadership experts that we have brought in as like lunch and learns and things like that, trying to find your biases. It's really hard for us to figure out where those are, but we need to strengthen up our validation and our approval processes. What that looks like, I'm going to need everyone's help to figure that out. But any type of work that comes out of LMS can be data, can be creative, can be content, it can be a document, it can be anything assisted by AI. Harder rules. Human-computer interactions. This is kind of a comical one, but Uber Eats did not have, for small mom and pop shops, they did not have their own food photography. So they embedded in the algorithm, let's use generative AI to use the description of what the small mom and pop shop is using to create an image as a placeholder, right? That gives you things like lounge instead of ranch over there, right? For a whole pizza pie, you get that, right? The cheese ravioli with vodka sauce looks awful, right? What we're learning here, it's easy for me to pluck these headlines, but boil it down a little bit further. And what we're seeing here is we need to have a lot more humans in the action, which seems obvious, but it's going to mean more work for us. It's going to mean a lot more review processes. It's going to mean a lot more approvals and checkoffs. Disinformation. This guy's an idiot. This is a lawyer who was working a case. I think it was between a major airline. You guys can probably read the full text on the side. I'm just trying to summarize for you here. But essentially, he defined other Keystone cases that were in relation to it. He decided, he's heard a little bit about ChatGPT, he's going to use it in place of a search engine or in place of a public record, essentially. But what he doesn't understand is ChatGPT is generative AI trying to find the next statistically accurate word in a sentence, essentially, right? We just talked about that. So it's going to say, reference this type of case, and it's going to make up different information. It cannot be held true because the training data is not meant to be sourced data. It's trying to create good language. So he's using cases that never even existed. They never existed. He brought them into the court of law, and he lost his case, and he lost his ass, and he lost all of his respect and credibility. I really don't want this to be us, that we're citing things based on generative outputs from GPTs. What do? It's going to take a little bit longer for us to fact check some of the information that's being generated out of some of these. That's data on the digital and media side. That's copy on that side of the house. Can't really fact check imagery and videography, but who knows? We'll find a way, right? And also disclosing origin. You're also seeing brands disclosing that this creation was made with the help of AI. You're seeing tags and disclaimers like that. Data privacy. This is a really good example of because this could really happen to us. We are trying to brainstorm with something like ChatGPT. I know I use ChatGPT a lot. Just know there's thousands of other generative AI models out there. That's the most commercialized, so it's easiest to use for examples. But essentially, it can help you write code, right? It knows which syntax is statistically accurate next up in the sequence of words, right? So it can help you create code. Carl could use this, right? If he's writing website code. So Samsung engineers were having issues fixing proprietary software, stuff that runs their apps, their hardware, their refrigerators, their everything. What they know is that the inputs in, the way that this tool is set up is it becomes part of the training data, right? So they put, help me fix this code, proprietary client information. Next competitor over, Apple, whoever, now has access to that if they were prompt correctly, right? So if we're using any of our client data on any generative platform, it's possible that that could be passed on the line, right? Now, that's not in every case. We'll have to get into terms of use and privacy policies and encryption and things like that, but that's how ChatGPT used to work as of 2023. So our official stance on this, we do not provide AI anything sensitive. We can make fun sentences, beautiful imagery. We can come up with fun visualizations for data, whatever the use case is, but we cannot use any data that's protected. That's PII, that's PCI, that's HIPAA, GDPR, run the whole gamut. It's protected data. We can't be putting that in. That's not good, especially if it's our client's intellectual property. That's even riskier. All right, moving through. Model integrity. How good is the app built? That's really hard for us to figure out. And what do they want to do with it? How does it work? Well, if it needs its own information to work.
How often do you read the terms of service? They are typically long texts that spell out what rights a company has with your information.
Well, recently, a popular video conferencing company has come under fire for what rights it now claims it has. Queen City News chief business correspondent Taylor Young explains tonight why Zoom could now be using your information to train artificial intelligence models.
A text that not many people read. The average terms of service, or TOS, takes about 30 minutes to comb through.
No, I didn't read the whole thing, and I don't think anybody does, really.
But in the fine print are agreements you make when using a platform.
Many of these companies have changed their business models so that their product is their customers' data.
Zoom's most recent TOS, which has been scrolling on the left side of the screen, is nearly 14,400 words long. But it's this paragraph right here that privacy advocates are calling alarming.
I think the line between what they consider their information and what they consider your information is really not well spelled out in the terms of service.
What it does spell out is an agreement that Zoom has the right to use customer data to train its artificial intelligence models. And no, there's no opt-out option.
They say, okay, you retain the license, you retain ownership of your information, but we have a sort of infinite license to use it for whatever purpose we please, including training AI.
Following a wave of backlash over the last few days, Zoom tweaked its TOS, adding a line saying it will not use audio, video, or chat to train AI models without consent. While John Davison says this is a significant change, he doesn't buy it at face value.
They are not saying we won't use your audio, video, or chat. They're saying specifically, we won't use your audio, video, or chat to train AI without your consent. So they might use it for other purposes. They're reserving that right.
That consent is saying, do you click the record button? Pop-up shows up, says, do you consent to the terms of in use? Yes. Okay. Well then, now that is part of the knowledge graph. I think I've had some lovely account service folks ask about like the Zoom AI companion. I've been a little hesitant on it because I want to say yes, like help it take meeting notes, help it transcribe the video to text and then create top line next steps. That's like the beauty of what it can do. But if that is a very, very delicate Sanford Health client conversation, that's part of the model, right? And it could be shown elsewhere. Where that is, hard for me to target, but that's part of the terms of use. And so the crappy part about my job is that we need a control on this and figure out, all right, what apps do have a good terms of use? What apps do have a privacy policy? I'm electing myself to read through these privacy policies and help figure out how they're going to store data. If we feel good and that aligns with our values and our morals, then we will put it on what's called the AI green list here at LMS. That means it's open for use, right? Again, I hope I'm arming you with knowledge of, you understand if you're going to use a Zoom AI companion, hopefully it's just a regular weekly status meeting. And you're not talking about major changes in the other person's organization that could end up in any type of search results, anything of that nature. And so part of the control will be that I'll be able to go through some of these things and figure out what we feel we're comfortable with to be on the green list. And lastly, legality. This gets really hard. Most of the questions about AI is, can you copyright it if I want it to be mine, or am I using someone else's copyrighted material when it comes out? Whether that's imagery, whether that's language, slogans, things like that.
In the world of AI, some of the biggest names are facing a legal battle of epic proportions. Stability AI, Midjourney, and DeviantArt are at the center of a class action lawsuit that claims their AI art tools have infringed on the rights of millions of artists and could cause permanent damage to the art market. But what exactly is at the heart of this lawsuit? It all comes down to how these AI tools are trained. According to The Verge, generative AI art models are fed billions of pictures collected from the web. These AI art generators can then be used to create artwork that replicates the style of specific artists, even though it may not be a direct copy of the image. While the creators of these AI tools argue that what they're doing is covered by fair use doctrine under US copyright laws, experts say it's a complicated question that will need to be settled in the courts. And if that wasn't enough, Getty Images is joining the fight, filing their own lawsuit in a UK court, alleging copyright infringement of millions of their images. It's a legal battle that's sure to have a big impact on the future of AI and the art community. With billions of images at stake and the rights of millions of artists on the line, it's a story we'll continue to follow here at Straight Arrow News.
This is the hardest part. Figuring out when we are stepping on the toes of other people's data, other people's design, other people's works. I spent quite a bit of time researching recent legislation, any court cases that are involved with this. I'll tell you, it's really hard. So the next slide, we'll be trying to walk through an example. But this is how I understand it today. If we're using generative AI, I want to make sure that we are crediting any of the applications that were used. If that is disclosed of where the influence has come from, then we also need to disclose that as well. Now, what's ours versus what is the models is really, really hard. What I have on the screen, I'm actually probably going to read quite a bit of it because what I'm trying to do is create some black and white out of a very gray area. Like they said, it's a really complicated question. So when it comes to the outputs, whatever is created after we are done using generative AI. In the US, there's no copyright protection for works generated solely by a machine. However, it seems that the copyright may be possible in cases where we can prove substantial human input. That's a really ambiguous term. The US Copyright Office is not a court though, so even if you do get copyright, you need to still register it before you're ever going to talk about infringement with somebody else. So what can I use here as like a true north type of thing? Can we prove whatever we're going to create with generative AI that there was substantial human input? Like, how do we prove that? Are we saving some of the prompting that we're using to achieve what we feel good about as a product? And has there been enough human input? Have we spent enough time on it? Have we manipulated enough? Now, on the other side of it, so that's what we've created. On the other side is, what about what's being ingested into the model? So generative AI, as we've talked about, these applications are trained on content, sometimes script from the web, whether that's text, code, imagery, whatever. Data is likely going to end up with someone that has ownership of that, and it's from a protected source. Some people try to argue fair use doctrine, which essentially just says, let's encourage the use of copyright protected works to promote freedom of speech, freedom of expression. But that precedent has not held true. So the question is to gut check of, am I stepping on someone else's legal protections is, does the use case change the nature of the material in its work? If you can find the original, can we say that we've changed it enough, right? Transformative use. Does it threaten possible financial gain or reputation with whoever we source the data from? And again, it's easiest to think of like graphics and text for these examples, but there are instances where data, performance data, code, those situations would be at play. Try to give you some examples of what those are. Okay, on the outputs section of it. So we create something, we feel great about it, we want to use it for commercial use. what is okay would be that we create, and these are real examples, by the way, these are things that I found have survived litigation. You create an 18-page comic book with an app, an API, or with Midjourney, which is GPT, which you reorganize, you assemble, you adjust, you bind, you create bleed, you do all of those things. That is okay. There's enough transformative work that has happened. But if you use very generic prompting, if Taylor uses, you know, I want this highway safety ad to look like it was painted by Van Gogh, we use that output. That's too close to the original author. That's a very mass type of generation there. It wasn't specific enough. We've likely infringed upon protected works in that situation. Third example, this is really interesting. This is true. A print won an art fair competition in Colorado. But when people were in an uproar about it, the individual talked about they spent weeks changing their prompts. Prompt engineering is the term they will hear, to get the most proper outputs that they can to create the art that they had. They were able to publish it. They were able to use it. Green check mark. We're good on that. Flipping over to inputs again. The data that's being ingested. Example one, using a model that's trained on images and novel pictures. The training data has been transformed in the process, and the output does not threaten the market for the original art. Example two, you fine-tune that model on 100 pictures by a specific artist, generate pictures to match their style, and an unhappy artist would have more of a case against you. So example one was using a broader database, a broader data set. It was not as specific in scope. That releases you from risk just because of the sheer volume of sources that were involved. Option two is based on prompting, we were too close to a specific style. That's as black and white as I can get it without reading a lot of court case documents. It's hard to get to a more clear answer, but that's how I've seen it today. So to kind of close us out, of that four resource list, the third on the list was clear approvals. I talked about this green list. I'm going to show it here in a minute. I've developed some resources that will be ongoing. They need to live, they need to breathe and grow over time as all the technology evolves. And that's where clear approvals will be located. And lastly, who's going to oversee some of these things? So we're going to designate who's overseeing the AI green list. I volunteer, okay? And how we deploy these tools, right? But who is responsible for finding newer technology that's going to help our discipline or help our agency? I'm putting that on the coaches and the disciplines. I'm not going to be able to effectively come up with, you know what, there's been a change in this type of platform. This could really be effective for our use. I can't play technology puppeteer across all the different types of work that we do here. I really need every person in this building to own some of that and ultimately bring that to your coach and your discipline to figure out if that's going to be something that we want to deploy and leverage here at LMS. And lastly, who's going to answer legal questions? That's going to be Gardy, probably with the help of me navigating it. So we have three kind of methods of governance. This is all in an effort to create tools or resources that are going to help us try to find a very murky type area. So let me, these areas here. So what I'm working on right now, let's see if I can get over here. There we go. Currently this lives on the LMS knowledge base. A lot of you might not even know what that is. This may end up in our new project management software, money.com. But for right now, I need something that lives and breathes. And so we talk about clear terminology. I've tried to go through any of the terms that I have helped explain over the first two sessions and give you a refresher on what that is. Because there's a lot of different definitions for things. So this is our glossary here. I talked about the AI green list. I've started going through terms of use, privacy policies, and a number of other assets that are publicly available to figure out, do we feel comfortable with using some of these tools? This list is going to grow. And this list might shrink as people change their privacy policies and their terms of use. But these are the ones that I feel comfortable with. This is going to grow as disciplines start thinking about what technology they would like to use specifically. And then lastly, this is very much rough and work in progress. I do not have many in here, but I'm essentially taking those stances, those definitive platforms that we take, and putting it into some guidelines. I think this is something that you can use when you're talking with students at USD who ask us about our AI approaches. This can be clients. You can show them that we have these resources available. We're organized, we're strategic, we're forward-thinking, and we're going to do it what I feel the right way. So that's kind of what I have for you today. Right up to 2 minutes left. I could take questions. How are we feeling? Everybody breathe. Go ahead.
So with all the dangers kind of with AI and all the wrong ways it can go, is there like a way to like train it back in a right way, or do you have to just completely scrap what you've done in whatever tool you're using?
That's a great question. I think the nice thing there is that right now, as I stand present day, we're not going to be developing our own model in any way. We're going to be leveraging others. So that's been their problem to kind of figure out, is how do they course correct if something's gone wrong. All these companies that have done the news, they've had to course correct because they've made mistakes. How we course correct if we're using technology that has made poor decisions on data governance and other things, I don't know. That's a little bit of a PR problem that I'm going to need help with. I don't have a great answer for you on that one. Does this make sense? Let's start there. Okay, I see some nods. Okay.
This was really helpful.
Good. Go ahead.
Mine's easy, don't worry.
Good.
So would you say overall, like, be pretty confident with exploring AIs? Like, maybe you can dabble in a little bit, maybe do some reading, but like maybe come to you or like look at more of the experts in the field before you kind of like go ahead and use AI for meeting notes.
Yeah. I think last session we talked about play in non-work pressure situations. That's what I would encourage in a lot of situations. If it's on the AI green list, I feel good about its use. I would love to talk specifically that example with account service to say, okay, what types of conversations are we okay with recording? So essentially, showing you this here today, I hope that, at least in the account service example, you understand that, you know what, because I did click record and I opted in using the AI companion, I know that all this is on the record. None of this is off the record. So if I think I'm having a conversation like that, I need to abort out of the meeting, or we just don't even start with that. But if you're talking to Sans Drywall and you're talking about a print app, like, and you're the only one on the call, yeah, record your conversation, it'll create meeting notes for you. You will save yourself an hour of writing up comments. I would encourage that. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.